And a big part of it is going to be highlighting and picking principles that you want to live your life based on. And that's why the funeral example is so imperative to this, is because when you think about the 4 people that are going to talk at your funeral and what you want them to say, or what type of characteristics they saw in you, what type of achievements you want them to talk about at your funeral, you highlight at the end of your life, these are the things I wanted to achieve. This is how this is how I want people that were close to me in my lifestyle, in my life, to view me. These are the principles I need to live by in order to achieve that.
Bread is of little use to the man who has betrayed his soul.
Maybe you're the protagonist in your story, but
welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paradyme. We're hoping you're having a great week, great month, great year. The year's coming towards an end here, and we hope that next year is going to be even better. So this week, the concept and focus that we're going to talk about is life centers and how they affect life's 4 support factors. So this is from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen R. Covey. We highly recommend you picked it up. It's been one of the biggest inspirations for us, one of our most liked books. So go ahead and pick that up. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. So before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit that little bell till it goes ding. Comment. We want to hear what your favorite part of the episode was. What center are you? And so we can all learn and grow together. So follow us on all our social media platforms. All that information will be down in the description below. And David, you go ahead and take us into our first topic.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We have a question for you. And that question is, how would you like to be remembered at your funeral? Who is there? Who attends? And what are they saying about you? So the main issue presented in the book, 7 Habits, and habit number 2, begin with the end in mind, is that people often find themselves achieving victories that are empty, successes that have come at the expense of things they suddenly realized were far more valuable to them. People from every walk of life, doctors, actors, politicians, business professionals, athletes, and plumbers, often struggle to achieve a higher income, more recognition of a certain degree or professional competence, only to find that their drive to achieve their goal blinded them to the things that really mattered most, and now they're gone. And we're highlighting that example in case there are principles that you would want to live by, so that way you can be remembered the way you want to. And the things that people are saying about you at your funeral line up with how you want to be remembered. Right.
Yeah, man. So that brings us to a large idea that's brought about in this chapter. And it tells us about centers. So I'm going to define here what a center is. Stephen R. Covey defines that as a center lies at the very center of our circle of influence. Recall to our last CIF. These are composed of our most basic paradigms, and these are a lens through which we see the world. It is through these centers that we deal with our vision and our values. Whatever is at the center of our lives will be the source of our security, guidance, wisdom, and power, which is the 4 life support factors that we all basically, our centers are around, right? We want to feel secure. We want to have some sort of sense of guidance. We're building wisdom through life's experiences, and we want to have some sense of power in our lives. So he highlights multiple different types of centers, right? He has the principle center, which is living your life based on a set of principles that you have. It doesn't move. These are values, beliefs that you have, that you make decisions based on. And we also have the alternative centers. I won't get too into depth about what those are, but there's things such as pleasure, possessions.
They can range. There's a wide range of centers.
Wide range of money, work, spouse. But these all lie within a person's center or circle of concern, the alternative centers. And
right.
the paradigm centers are going to deal with within your circle of influence. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about our centers. What are your guys' centers, and how have you used this information in your life?
Yeah, so I could start. We actually, I do want to mention, we read this book prior to our book club being formed. Obviously, the audience may not know that, but this was one of the first books that we read in our book club. And then we have really detailed notes and stuff that we kind of took time and figured out like where our principles lies And so we do have notes on what our centers were before and where they lie now. And so mine previously were money, work, and self-centered. Obviously, money-oriented, meaning you hold a high sense of responsibility or a high sense of worth around the currency, whatever sense. If it's making money, if it's gathering money, if it's accumulating money, you find it to be important to your life, and which I do. And that's why I collaborated with work, because I believe when you work and you're in an act of service, you're not just doing yourself a justice, but you are trying to help other people, depending on what line of work you're in or why you're trying to make money for your family or whatever. But I also identify with self, because I do find myself to be a very introverted person when I want to be. I sometimes put myself before others. I try to recognize that, try to become aware of that through time and getting older. But I would say that's the least amount of centered compared to money and work. That was previously. I did make an addition to my centers. I added a friend. So friend centered, it's just friend centered. With this book club being formed, and a lot of my friends are very close. I don't have like a large social group. A lot of my friends are very close to me, very, I guess at arm's reach. I don't have a large social group. So when I do dissect or look for advice or even give my own opinion about something, my friends that are close to me, if they give me their opinion or they're kind of criticizing or giving me critiques on my opinion about a specific topic, I hold that a very high value. It's an impact on my life. All my friends hold a very high value of their own opinions. So that's how I found friend-centered, money-centered, work-centered, and then self-centered. I think those are my big, centers that are priority to me. So those are going to be mine.
All right.
Interesting.
Okay, one thing I want to touch on is that the end goal for the listener and for really anybody with this book is saying that you should be principle centered. We're talking about we all have our principles that we've established, and then we try to hold ourselves to that. But if we had to choose an alternative center, this would be our alternative. Mm-hmm. And just a real quick, why it's important to have principles and to be principle centered is that he says, in life, things change all the time. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. You just never know. So he goes, people can't live with change if there's not a changeless core inside them. So to have principles is like having a changeless core where you're like, if you boil me down and filter me out, what is left that I find valuable and important to me are X, Y, and Z. Right. And as long as you can align yourselves with that at the end of the day, then you can be like, I can hang my hat on that and be happy. Obviously we all have flaws and things like that. And our alternative center would be what Dev just touched on. For myself, if I had to pick an alternative center, it would probably be, in the past, looking back at my notes, I think I'd put pleasure center. And I think at the time I was transitioning from just two different phases of my life. And I wanted to focus on having fun and making sure like what John does is what John wants, and a fun time is what I want at the time. And I still do, obviously. But I think now I've kind of more transitioned into possession centered. It breaks down security as your security is based on your reputation, your social status, or tangible things you possess. I think I lean more into your reputation, your guidance. You make decisions based on what will protect, increase, or better your display of possessions. Wisdom is broken down to is you see the world in terms of comparative economic and social relationships, maybe. And then your power would be your function within the limits of what you can buy or the social prominence you can achieve. So I think that's very maybe adulthood. I don't know. People always comparing. So that's what I'll chime in on.
Nice.
Good one.
For me, I think when we had first read this book, I had wrote down that I was work-centered and probably self-centered. I know for sure that I was work-centered because at the time I was doing a lot of freelance design. There's a lot of security that came from just working so much. Like that was something immediately within my control, and that's what I was doing a lot. I do think I have switched over a little bit more into the pleasure center currently, just because I do feel secure when I'm out and I'm having that pleasure high. I'm getting my guidance from, I guess, making decisions on what will give me the most pleasure, right? Like it's been a little bit more of having fun when I did get a sense of comfortability with my new job. You know, I have more time off, I have a little bit more money to spend. So I definitely have noticed within myself that I have switched over to the pleasure center. Yeah, I would say that pleasure center. How about you, Jay?
So for myself, you know, when we first read this book, it was probably about the beginning of 2019, 2020-ish, somewhere in there. 2020 is when we started reading this.
I think I want to say it doesn't matter. I think we're still 19, but doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Might have been late 2019.
Yes.
But when I first wrote this, or wrote what I was, my centers, it was a combination of them. And the author states, more often than not, our centers, our alternative centers, are a combination of these centers. And so for myself, when I first wrote down what mine were, it was self, pleasure, possession, money, and work in no order. And as time's progressed, it's been about a year and a half now, I would say that my alternative centers are still relatively the same. It hasn't changed much. However, I would say I've been more preferential to self, pleasure, and work. I get a lot of my identity from being like, okay, I'm a scholar, right? That's a big part of my centers. I put a lot of emphasis on, okay, I'm a scholar. But I've noticed a lot of things for myself is when I feel like things are kind of mundane, I like to chase pleasure. So for myself, you know, it's always trying to get the best, go and have more and more fun.
Right.
You know, the way Covey defines it is the pleasure-centered person soon becomes bored with each succeeding level of fun and constantly cries for more and more. The next pleasure has to be bigger and better, more exciting with a bigger and better high. And I could see that inside myself, which leads to a feeling of like, wow, life should be centered around pleasure, which, you know, it shouldn't be. There's a, you know, there's a good quote inside this part, the highlighted part of Pleasure Center that really kind of stuck out to me. I just wanted to mention it. It says, too many vacations that last too long, too many movies, too much TV, too much internet, too much video game playing, or just simply too much undisciplined leisure time in which a person continually takes the course of least resistance leads to a gradually wasted life. And so for myself, there's times when I'm just kind of chasing fun. And a lot of that times it's a lot of time. And it ends up being like wasted time.
Right.
You know, there's time I could be productive. That's time I could be forming better relationships with the people I love. But instead, I'm thinking about things in the terms of like, how can I make it bigger and better? How am I going to have fun? How am I going to make this pleasurable for myself? And so it's good to have these innocent pleasures in moderation that can provide some sense of relaxation for the body and mind. But pleasure offers no deep, lasting satisfaction or sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so
go ahead.
I wanted to ask you guys, how would you identify these in people, either in yourself or people around you? Are there behaviors, habits, and actions of certain centers that stick out to you guys?
Definitely for me. Or are you gonna say something, Joe?
For me, I mean, the one that sticks out to me is people that are church center. They get like a lot of their personality, who they are, like their brand is church. And like, I think he even talked from the book, like being centered around gospel is different than being centered around church, you know? And they get a lot of their identity from that. And there's people that you know that are like that. You're like, oh, my uncle, my cousin, that person down the street. And I think just being able to pick that out from people, you can kind of just know who they are and know who you're talking to, you know? Yeah,
definitely. Like even another example would be like social media. Some people need that validation of attention. Social media is a big vehicle to gain attention. And that would go into the friend centered or even the self-centered wanting to do things.
Man, I think that shit could be its own category, you know?
It really can. But really identifying the behaviors, actions, why people do things, because people don't have to tell you why they do things. You can just look at their actions, and it doesn't matter if they tell you, oh, I'm posting this because I want people to like my photo. That's very low. No one's going to say that. But some people do that because they need that validation of the crave of feeling important.
That's true. For me, I think I can identify people who are enemy centered pretty well. But by the way, everyone, we are referencing. There's a chart in the book that covers the security, guidance, wisdom, and power, and it's in a grid, and he goes through all of the centers. So in the enemy centered, I'm reading that people's security is volatile and it's based on the movements of their enemy. I know people in my life who feel like they can't do something just because their quote unquote enemy is sort of controlling their life. And in theory, they're putting their enemy at the center of their life. So all of their movements sort of depend on them, their security, like everything. And they're very defensive, and the only power that they have is just the anger or the offensiveness that comes with that, with their enemy, trying to belittle.
Yeah, again, this book has so much detail. Obviously, we can't go through every single detail in this chapter. Just this is one chapter, and we're going through a very small subsection of this chapter. But to kind of continue off what David's saying, there's a lot of different ways you can preference enemy-centered, friend-centered, church-centered, but the enemy-centered. Stephen Covey states that some people that are enemy-centered, if they're hard workers or their work ethic is through the roof, they will try to outcompete all their coworkers. It's not like the coworkers are out to get them or they're angry at their coworkers, but they see it as a sense of competition. And there are a lot of people that are just competitive naturally.
Yeah.
And so there's so many ways to look at these centers and so many ways you can visually take them and apply them to your life or how you identify yourself. But I think it's just great to be aware of where your centers lie.
Yeah,
Totally.
I think one thing to mention too is in an enemy-centered person, it's that competitive nature. I forget what book it was. It might have been this one that talks about win-lose. When you're in a competitive nature, your conflict style becomes win-lose. Either somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And that could be really detrimental to relationships, especially in the workplace or at home. If you live that type of lifestyle, and let's say you've lived that your whole life, what happens when that gets removed and you don't have an enemy, right? So you have to figure out some other way to live. But at the same time, for myself, I would say identifying somebody that's pleasure-centered or possession-centered would be one of the ones that I could identify a little bit easier because it's in myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So looking for that person that's always chasing the newest, funner thing to do, trying to go out all the time, or isn't happy unless they're going out all the time.
I'm just kidding.
And I mean, we've all been subjected to this. I think just being
Right.
adults, that's what it is. Like,
I was just
you
gonna
wanna
say,
have-
Jay, I could honestly identify times in my life where these have been my center. I think you can kind of have a little bit of each, or maybe from the security, guidance, or wisdom or power, maybe there's a multiple variety of where we're getting those senses of the 4 life support systems, So,
Yeah. So,
that's interesting.
one thing that I think should be asked is, how can knowing this information benefit people?
Yeah, like why do people need to know what these centers are, where their centers align, or where their friends or family centers align?
Yeah, I paraphrased nothing from the book, but I kind of took what I could remember from what he talked about and put it in my own context. But so I'm just gonna read word for word what I put. It gives one clarity on the overall vision in life while maintaining a strong sense of belief in themselves. Principles are adaptable to all aspects of life. If you never seek to find your mission and build a solid foundation, you'll forever be starting from level 1. And what I mean by level 1 is, let's think of family. If you know you have family issues and you're avoiding them, right? You're going out or you're going to work, you're spending time outside your household, not dealing with the issues. how do you ever expect to get to level 2 if you don't ever address it and find a solid foundation for everybody to step on and then grow from? I think it's forever avoidance allows people to stay on level 1 in a lot of aspects of life. You can be on level 50 in your workplace, but then be miserable with your partner because you don't want to talk about uncomfortable conversations. I think in all aspects of life, you have to have a very strong sense of principles, and they don't change. We grow and we alter the way our thinking over time. But at the end of the day, our principles are a strong foundation for us to be built and to grow, sort of like our legacy, like our footprint in life. And if we never find that, then it's hard to build that.
I think the benefits that I see too is that we all get to sort of ask ourselves that question, how do we want to be remembered, and how do we get to our deepest values? We kind of get to examine them with a magnifying glass, and we pick apart the scripts that we're living, and then we get to ask ourselves, this ladder that we're climbing, this is an example from the book, guys. What are you climbing up the ladder of success only to realize that you were on the wrong wall the whole time? So I think this information allows us to look at our life from a bird's eye view and pick which wall we're actually going up, and then move the ladder and then go up that one.
Yeah.
I think it's more like just a reflection point, after reading this, you're like, am I okay with being remembered as being someone who's money centered? Reflection point. What's your personal mission statement? I know it talks about it. We can go to real quick. A personal mission statement should be something that you're aiming for, align with your principles, and you kind of want to be that, what you're remembered by, and just being honest with yourself and reflecting on the different centers and being like, hey, I'm money centered. Am I okay with that? Looking back at my roadmap to success and everything, my principles, I should veer back on to aligning myself with principles more, I think it's just like a check-in with yourself.
Yeah.
You can use it that way.
Yeah. Can you guys think of any examples of principle-centered people?
I mean,
there's, well, I wouldn't be able to give like fine detail though. Cause
how does the author define the characteristics?
When I think of it, I don't know. Have you guys seen Parks and Recreation?
Yeah, the two.
Yeah.
I think of Ron Swanson. Ron Swanson is a principle-centered person, right? Whenever somebody comes to his desk with an idea, he stops and he's like, okay, he knows his principles. He's like, I want as little government involvement as possible. Here's my 10 things that I believe in. Does this align with what I believe in? No, it doesn't. I'm not doing it. Right? The man has a strong sense of principles in the show, and he makes all his decisions based on that. And I think that is a good example of what a principle-centered person is. Your principles might not be that, right? Yeah. But he lives by those principles and makes his decisions based on those. And I thought it would just be important to highlight that that's kind of what an example would look like. Go check out the show. And a big part of it is going to be highlighting and picking principles that you want to live your life based on. And that's why the funeral example is so imperative to this, is because when you think about the 4 people that are going to talk at your funeral and what you want them to say, or what type of characteristics they saw in you, what type of achievements you want them to talk about at your funeral, you highlight at the end of your life, these are the things I wanted to achieve. This is how I want people that were close to me in my lifestyle, in my life, to view me. These are the principles I need to live by in order to achieve that. And so I think it's really important it's very stoic, right? It's important to look at the end and keep an end in mind. It's like, okay, someday I'm going to die. Before that happens, what do I want to achieve, and how do I want people that love me to see me?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's kind of what it's about. Like the last line of my mission statement, which I added it when I got ACE, was be a good owner of the ACE. He has needs. Make sure to give him what he needs. And I was like, hell yeah, dude. If I would die today, people would be like, John was a fucking good owner of the ACE, man. Mm-hmm. He loved that dog. And I'm okay with that. That's what I want, and I try to live like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So yeah, I think we did again. This book is an amazing book. We suggested before. I think all of us agree, like we would definitely be down to do this as a book club meeting. Go through this whole book again, because I think all of us have found a lot of satisfaction in reading this book. There's so much information, and so much to talk about too. And like David Goggins, when we read that book, Can't Hurt Me, I think all of us started running. All of us picked up our workout routine. All of us, it had such a huge impact on all of us. And we're trying to continue that. And the more books we read to learn about people's experience, of applicable things that we can apply to our life, I think we're just trying to give back through the way we can through YouTube and other social media outlets. So
one thing I just wanted to add is that I think some of the benefits of having a personal mission statement is that I wrote mine probably in 2019 when we read this book. It had been at least 6 months since I've recently reread it, because after reading this chapter, I went back and reread mine, and I was very reassured and like happy that I had stayed pretty much on track with exactly what I wrote. The things I wrote then are still things that I want now. And it's like checking my map, checking my compass, and be like, I'm still heading in the right direction. So I think these are things that when you boil everything down, you go, this is what is important. This is how I want to be remembered. And you can always check back a year from now, 10 years from now, and be like, hey, you know what? I'm still making myself happy. I'm still staying on track.
And even if you go off the tracks a little bit, you can still
reassess.
refer back and be like, this is the shit that actually matters to me. Like all this extra pleasure center going, like this is what I wrote down, and I need to reevaluate that.
Just like we had said, it's a good reflection point, this habit. Like, hey, you know what?
Those things shouldn't change.
Right. Changeless.
yes, sir.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Can't Hurt Me when he was in Delta training, where he was forgot to put points on his map, where if he hit this point, he needed to double back and make sure he get back on track.
Right.
I forget what he calls those, but it is a good place to have that, because if you have a mission statement and this is how you want to live your life, every couple months, if you look back to it, then you can be like, oh, okay, I've kind of strayed away from this one. I need to get back on track in some way, shape, or form. I'll have to go back and figure out what he calls those, David Goggins, but that's a great way to reanalyze if you're on track or not still.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps it up, guys. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much for watching, guys. That was another episode of Paradyme's Concepts in Focus. We hope you really enjoyed the episode. Like the video, comment down below. What are your alternative centers if you have them? Because we all got them. What are some principles you want to live your life by? Maybe we get some inspiration from that and add that to our personal mission statement. What is your personal mission statement? What type of life do you want to live, and how do you want to be remembered? Drop that down in the comment section down below.
Smash that like button.
Subscribe, like, hit the little bell. Follow us on all our social media platforms. And don't forget, the work you put into being who you are today equals who you will be tomorrow.
The man who has betrayed his soul.
Maybe you're the protagonist in your story, but like there's a million other people.